Hey guys, most of you know me. My name's Michael. I am the student pastor here. And while you guys get to see me pretty often, because I get up here, usually I'm doing like the announcements or the offering or praying for another church. So like getting up and actually giving the word to you guys is still a little different from what I'm used to. Because, I'm used to working with the high school and the middle school students, mostly the middle school students. I've been doing that for about 4 years. So when James asked me to speak today, at first I was really excited, but then we go through the whole flip-flop of emotions. You know how it goes, like you're excited and you're nervous, and you're excited and you're nervous. And then I realized children's ministries are back. Yeah. Which means since there's no kids in here, we're not doing those super short messages anymore. And then I started to get a little worried because with like the middle school, you got like 12, 15 minutes tops and they are done. So I'm like, I have these people for 30 minutes. Like, how am I going to keep their attention? Like with the middle school, you have to like bribe them with candy. And so I started thinking, I'm like, so I got a plan. So if you guys will all take a second and look under your seats. I'm just kidding. There's nothing there, guys. But seriously, guys, so I'm really excited to be here, and we are doing this Life of Christ study. How many of you guys are loving that? Man, I know I am. Hey, I just want to take a quick second and say, wherever you are on that study right now, don't quit. Like some of you guys, you're already seeing the fruit of this in your life. Some of you guys, maybe you haven't seen it yet, but I just want to say, don't give up, keep going. Remember, it took 7 days of marching around the city of Jericho for those walls to come crashing down. Some of y'all are just on day 4, so just keep going. But during this study, we've been talking a lot about some of the different aspects of Jesus and the way that Jesus lived. And today, we are going to be talking about his mercy. And specifically, we're going to be looking at one of his miracles, the story where Jesus heals the leper. Now, just to kind of set the tone for this a little bit, because I love with this Life of Christ study how we've been kind of learning about what's going on in a situation like the historical backgrounds and all the stuff like that. Now, I'm not Mark, so I can't go into the depth that he does, but I can say this. When Jesus did this miracle, he was early in his ministry. Okay, he had started his ministry. He'd already been baptized. He's already started having disciples starting to follow him. He'd already started healing, and he'd already started teaching and preaching. In fact, we know from Matthew, this was right after he came down from the Sermon on the Mount. But there was a whole lot of people who didn't really know what he was about yet. Okay, and the other thing we know about this miracle is that it was important. And we know that because it was mentioned in 3 out of the 4 Gospels. It was mentioned in Matthew 8, Mark 1, and Luke 5. Look, clearly God wanted us to pay attention to this, right? Anytime something is in there 3 times, that's like a cue that we need to be focused. We're trying to learn something. Like, where's the teachers in the room? If you say something 3 times, it's going to be on the test, right? Like, that's kind of what I'm getting with this here. And then just further understanding kind of the whole situation where we're at. And I promise I'll show you what I'm getting to with this. Like during this time, there's a lot of things going on, right? So we had political unrest. We had religious confusion. We had racism. We had women being treated poorly. And in the middle of it, here comes Jesus. Now, Jesus is the Messiah. We know that. And everyone in the Jewish customs was expecting a Messiah to come. And Jesus brought with him the kingdom of heaven. And that's what we talked about a couple days ago with the life of Christ. But it didn't look the way that people thought it would, right? Like even John the Baptist in Matthew 3 said that he was ready to separate the chaff from the wheat with a winnowing fork, which I had to look it up. That's like a pitchfork, right? And he would gather the wheat into his barn and burn the chaff with a never-ending fire. Like in their head, like the Romans, that was the chaff, right? So they were expecting Jesus to come and burn the Romans with a never-ending fire. They were expecting a conqueror, right? To free them from this Roman rule. What they got was something entirely different, right? So in my head, I have this idea like Christmas. Okay, like the kids, they wake up, they run downstairs, they're excited, they grab the stockings, and they're expecting it to be filled with like candy and like all sorts of things like that, maybe some toys, and they open it up, and what do they see? Rolled up socks and underwear. Yeah, you know where I'm going with that. Yeah, man, talk about disappointment. But that candy, man, that would have been taste good for a day or two. But how many of you know when your toes be popping out of the side of your socks, that's what you need? Like, how many of you are so glad we serve a God? He doesn't always give us what we want, but he gives us what we need. Man, and what he brought us was mercy. He brought us his grace. In fact, if you look, like a third of all of Christ's ministry was mercy. Look, we have healthcare, miracles, serving the poor. He even told his followers, whatever you do to the least of you, that's what you do to me. Like, guys, that is his mercy, right? And he also said in our days, this is the day we're living in, right? We're gonna see people turning on each other. We see brother against brother, parents against their children, and that's what's going on right now. And if you don't believe me, you're not looking at the news, and you're probably a lot happier than the rest of us. So just keep with that. But we just don't see a lot of that today. Now we do see some amazing things, like what happened Friday. Guys, we had those food boxes. James is going to talk about it later. We passed out I don't know how many tons of food throughout the community. That was amazing. But mostly what I see, right? I see people whose hearts are filled with hate and their words spew venom. And guys, look, here's my goal for today, right? I want you to leave here knowing the mercy of Christ and how to distribute that mercy to others. Look, that goes even if you despise their opinion, even if you hate what they put on social media, we're called to love our enemies, love the people that don't love us. All right, so let's talk about mercy for a little bit. All right, so mercy, I've heard it put this way. Mercy is getting what you don't deserve, okay? And here's the thing, Jesus, man, he loves to extend mercy. He extends mercy to so many people, and not just once, not twice, but many, many times, right? Instead of giving people what we deserve, we got mercy, we get grace. And I for one, I'm super thankful for that. But let's go to Mark's word, right? So we're gonna be focusing mainly on Mark's telling of this for now. It was told by a bunch of different people, 3 of the 4 gospels we said. So let's look at Mark 1 verse 40, sorry. It said, now a leper came to him, imploring him, kneeling down to him and saying to him, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Then Jesus, moved with compassion, man, that is Jesus' go-to move, and I am thankful for it, stretched out his hand and he touched him and said to him, I am willing, be cleansed. And as soon as he had spoken, immediately the leprosy fell off him and he was cleansed. And he strictly warned him and sent him away at once and said to him, see that you say nothing to anyone. I'm going to pause there for a second. So he said that because he wanted to continue doing ministry and showing more compassion. We'll talk more about that later. But I think it's interesting, he was told to tell no one, and what did he do? We know he told everyone, right? But when we're saved, we're told to tell everyone, and often we tell no one. Maybe we're all a little bit rebellious to a degree here. But then he says, but go on your way, show yourself to the priest. That's so he could get documented healing. All right. However, he went out and began to proclaim it freely and to spread the matter so that Jesus could no longer openly enter the city, but was outside in deserted places, and they came to him from every direction. A couple things I want to talk about this. First one is this. Did y'all catch? The leper said, if you are willing, not if you are able. He didn't say, hey, if you can, if you're capable of doing this, would you? He said, if you are willing. The leper recognized who he was. He recognized the power and the authority of God in this man. But what he wasn't sure about was his willingness. We'll talk about that later. All right, the next thing I want to talk about is leprosy. Now, leprosy, anybody who's grown up in church, you've probably heard about it, but you might not really understand it, right? Because it's not very common today. It was quite common back then, right? We know it today as something called Hansen's disease, and it's a disease that affects the skin, the nerves, the eyes, and your upper respiratory tract. And today it's easily cured, especially if you catch it early. But back then, there was no cure. It was a death sentence, okay? And they took these people, right? And they took people that had leprosy, and they put them all together away from everyone in these places called leper colonies. In fact, they were so scared of leprosy that anybody who had any kind of skin disease, right? You start to get that discoloration. They get scared. They probably just threw you in the leper colonies anyway, right? Now, I actually looked it up. So we actually had leper colonies in the U.S., but it actually wasn't even that long ago. The last one closed down in 1999. So not even that long ago, right? And some of the people were still there until 2015, okay? Now, you'll never guess where that place was. Louisiana. I'm pretty sure it was like right next to LSU. Number one, first dig. Okay. All right. So, but that was the last leper colony in the United States. It's actually a really cool place. There's a museum there. I was looking it up. But here's the thing. So we're going to be looking at some of the things about leprosy. But what I want you to understand, okay, and I don't want you to get lost in the facts and the details I'm talking about this with the leprosy, because what we have to look at is this man's disease. There is a relationship to the sin in our lives. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about leprosy, but you're going to see how a lot of this relates to sin that people are going through right now, okay? But the thing about leprosy is this, all right? Leprosy, like sin, would destroy three things, okay? Leprosy would destroy three things. The first thing, leprosy killed the soul first, okay? You see, the thing is with leprosy is they could not be touched by anyone, okay? If they were, that person would become unclean themselves. Okay, now I don't want you to get this in your head. This isn't like the kindergarten, recess, playground. Kids are running around like, oh, you've got cooties. No, it's not like that. There was a real fear of catching this disease. But not only that, they were actually commanded by God not to be around them. Numbers 5:1-3 says this: the Lord gave these instructions to Moses. Command the people of Israel to remove from the camp anyone who has a skin disease or a discharge or has become ceremonially unclean by touching a dead person. This command applies to men and women alike. Remove them so they will not defile the camp in which I live among them. So people couldn't come in contact with them because they didn't want to become unclean. Like we only thought we were socially distancing now, right? These people literally had to carry a bell with them and ring it, and as they were traveling, yell, unclean, unclean. Like we see that, actually, like the closest thing we see to that this day and age is actually this COVID scare that's going on, right? Like nobody wants to be around somebody that has COVID. And like nobody even wants to be around somebody who is exposed to someone with COVID. And some of you guys, you take it a lot further. You're like, wait, so like you were with someone who was around someone who was in the same room with somebody who had been exposed to COVID? Like, nope, I am out. Little Susie, you make your own breakfast. You find your own way to school. I ain't driving you. But like, and we also see this, like this is clearly spelled out in Leviticus 13:45. It says the leper must wear torn clothes. Let his hair be unkempt and cover the lower part of his face and cry out, unclean, unclean. Now, like I imagine for these people, that was mortifying. But I started thinking, I was like, except for that last part, the crying out, unclean, unclean, that sounds like a trip to Walmart nowadays. I mean, you know, they got the torn clothes, hair unkempt, lower face, yeah. But guys, so the other problem with it is this, okay? People viewed this disease as an outward sign of an inward failure, right? And this was common for this day. It's like we actually see that thinking in another story in the Bible, John 9. This is when they encounter a blind man, and it says, as he went along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? And of course, we know Jesus' answer was neither. But I wanted to like illustrate, that was the thought process during the times. They see this man who had this disease and they think that he had some sin or some secret failure in his life, and the disease was God's punishment or his judgment. So imagine if you could, right? You're walking around, okay? Everyone sees you, and you can see like the wheels just turning in their head as they're looking at you, and they are trying to guess, what was this horrific secret thing you did in your life that warranted such a horrific punishment? Man, I think there are people walking around like that today with a past that people look at them and they have those same thoughts. Man, that's a miserable way to live, right? So they won't come around you. You're contagious. People think you're cursed and you're judged by God because they saw leprosy as a sign of moral failure. And guys, I think this season more than ever, we have learned the importance of just personal contact with people, being around them, like physical touch, okay? So physical touch is my love language, right? So this season's been a little bit weird. Like, don't get me wrong, nothing's really changed at home and stuff. But out in public, there's nothing. Like, there's no hugs, there's no handshakes. There's everyone's trying to do these weird little elbow things, right? And I remember a few months ago, Kelly and I were watching a show. True story, 100% true. We were watching some show. I don't even remember what it was. It was some crime show, like Law and Order or something. And there was this scene where some dude walks into the room and a guy's sitting at the table, and he stands up and he reaches out and he shakes this man's hand. That was it. And I remember looking at it and I was I felt envy start to fill up my heart. And I'm getting jealous. And I'm man, this is bad. I was I've only gone 4 months without a handshake here, and I'm already feeling so jealous of this TV show's character, right? Because he gets to shake some dude's hand. I'm where's Kirk Hess? I need a hug. Man. But I said, that was only after 4 months, and I was still being able to have physical touch with my wife, with my kids, and people that were close to my family. Can you imagine going a year without touching anyone? How about 5 or 10? I heard recently, so you need 8 hugs a day just to be mentally healthy. Some of you guys is 12. But one of those is supposed to be at least 20 seconds. Now look, guys, I'm here for you. If you need me to be one of those 8 hugs, I can do that for you. But the only person I want to hug for more than 20 seconds is my wife. So... Sorry, Chuck. All right. So, but guys, being unclean, having leprosy, it kills the soul. What else kills the soul? Living in sin. All right. So the second thing leprosy does is this. It erodes your body. Now, I'm not going to get too graphic or anything with this because leprosy was a pretty nasty disease, right? But here's just kind of the highlights. So it causes your skins to be discolored. You start to develop these sores and these painful ulcers all over your body. The skin dries and cracks. It affects your nerves. It causes extreme pain. And then it kills the nerves, so you feel nothing at all, right? So literally, when you're at that point here, part of your body can catch on fire and you won't even realize it. This was a bad thing, and it was a life-ending disease. And I'm not even just talking about ending from death. Sometimes that could take 20 years. But you are left crippled and in pain while you wait for this disease to take your life. I'm going to pause you for a second. I think you guys are still thinking about the leper. Remember, the story of the leper relates to the sin in our lives. Right? So I'm going to read that again, right? You are left crippled and in pain while you wait for this disease, this sin to take your life. Man, Leviticus 13:46 says this, as long as he has the infection, as long as he has the sin, he remains unclean. He must live alone. He must live outside the camp. So the leper was literally a walking dead man, okay? And the last thing I want to talk about with what leprosy does is it causes spiritual separation. Guys, I don't know if you know this, but we have a precious gift. It was given to us because of what was done on the cross. The veil between heaven and earth has been torn, and now the Spirit of God can dwell in us. What that means is that we can connect and we can worship God wherever we want. At our house, in our car, at the grocery store, just wherever. before the cross, that wasn't the case. In order to be connected with God, you had to go through this process of making yourself clean and being forgiven through sacrifices and at the temple. All right? Here's the thing, though. This man, because of his disease, right, he was unclean. And when he was unclean, he couldn't go to the temple, which means that he couldn't make the sacrifices he needed, and it means he couldn't get right with God. Look, and these people here, in fact, they were not even allowed to go to the temple unless they had a documented healing. This is why Jesus told them to go to the priest, by the way. All right, but here's the problem. There's no cure. There's no cure for this. So I want you to wrap your mind around this, right? So look, they were unable to worship, and they were unable to be made right with God. All of this was because of this disease that they had no control over, right? That they were taught they only had because of the sin in their lives, right? But to be cleansed of that sins, they had to go to the temple. But they couldn't go to the temple because they had the disease, which they only thought they had because of their sin. Do you see how hopeless they probably felt? How frustrated, how rejected they probably felt? And not just by everyone, right? But by the church. Maybe even by God. Side note, look, some of the deepest wounds that people in this room right now might have are from a church. But let me tell you guys something. Those aren't from God. Because a church is made up of broken people, and broken people make mistakes. But you're a broken person too. And God's mercy is enough to cover all of that. So, look, these lepers, they not only felt this hurt, they felt this pain, but they also felt the shame of everything that goes with it. Remember, I said this was considered a public showing of a private sin. And everywhere that they went, ringing that bell, crying out, it just further pushed them deeper into this shame. And let me tell you something, this can be such a binding thing, shame. Right? And I imagine that these people, the only place they felt any sort of comfort was in the colonies with people that were just like them. So they're bound by what God wants to do in their life because of this shame. And let me tell you guys something. So before I did student ministry, I did 4.5 years of prison ministry. It's something that's very real to me. And let me tell you, we want to talk about shame. When these people in the prisons, coming out of the prisons especially, that's something they deal with, often because of how people perceive them. But the issue with this is they have this shame, so they retreat to what's comfortable to them. And they retreat back into the sin, right, that got them there in the first place. But this isn't exclusive to inmates, guys. This is all of us. When we have that sin and we have that shame, we want to pull back from the people that can help us. Man. So with everything this leper was feeling, right? So he had the separation, the physical pain. He had the shame, right? He left his comfort zone. He left what was comfort for him, and he met Jesus at a public place. And it was there where he encountered Jesus. All right, the next thing I want to talk about is this. And this is for everybody, not just LSU fans this week. The power of worshiping through the pain. Man, talk about pain going on. Yeah. So, dig number 2. I got one more. All right. So let's look at Matthew's telling, all right? Matthew 8 says this. When we had come down from the mountain, great multitudes followed him, right? And behold, a leper came and worshiped him, saying, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Yeah, so remember, this was 3 places in the gospel. And let's look at the wording that's used. So Matthew uses the word worship. Mark says he fell to his knees. Guys, that's honor for people in authority over you. Right? Luke says he fell to his face. That's honor for a king. So I want you to think about it. This leper with this skin disease, right? With his sores and his exposed and his inflamed nerves, he fell to his knees and he fell to his face to worship Jesus. That was probably excruciating. And I don't know about you, but I don't even like to fall to my knees unless I've already scouted, like, what am I going to use to pull myself up? Because, so this guy, but he's like in the middle of the road. There's nothing. So, but hey, this is what I want you guys to understand. Look, our best worship comes in our pain. So we have this man out of his comfort zone. Every movement he made, right, could be an excuse not to worship. We're talking the pain in his feet and his knees, every joint, his back, and every nerve might have said no to worship, but his heart said yes. Guys, I can tell you from experience, my sweetest worship came when I was in the darkest hole of my life. And if that wasn't the case, I wouldn't be standing here today. So I actually know a person here I talked to last week. So it's a man that goes to our church, okay? And let me say, God has done a miracle in his life. Like absolutely, not just with healing, but with changing his heart and who he was. But recently he got some news that many people might be discouraged by. So last week I saw him and I asked him how he was doing. And his response, honestly, it left me speechless. For the next 3 or 4 minutes, he proceeded to tell me how blessed he was and how good God was and how he didn't see how anyone who had gone through and seen what he saw could answer any other way than to talk about God's blessing and his greatness. That's true worship. And here's the thing, as people, in our flesh, we know how to worship. Our flesh is trained for it. When we do something great, what do? We celebrate, we cheer, right? When Arkansas football wins, we cheer. When LSU loses, we cheer, right? So, but guys, when we get the promotion we wanted, when we get the news we wanted, when she says yes, all the things, we know how to worship. But the problem is this: we hear the news we want, and then we worship. That's backwards. Look at the leper. He fell to his knees and he worshiped God because he is great, not because he would do great things. He didn't even know if this man would heal him, and he was already worshiping him. Man, check this out though. This is one of the most powerful realizations for me. And this is kind of where I want to land on. I'm not doing the 3 closings that's typically required. I'm just doing one, okay? Jesus didn't take my place. Jesus didn't just take my place. He put me in his place. So Mark 1:45 puts it this way. However, he went out and began to proclaim it freely and to spread the matter so that Jesus could no longer openly enter the city, but was outside in deserted places, and they came to him from every direction. All right, so get this, guys. This man, he was healed. He was free. He was able to go out in public again. He was able to shake somebody's hand or to get that hug, right? He was able to go to the temple again. He was able to worship again. He was 100% restored. Every limitation on his life had been taken off. Also symbolic of us, right? But Jesus, prior to this encounter with this man, he could go in the city. He could go to the temple, right? But when word spread, he was the outcast. He was the one who was left out of the city. He was the one that was prevented from going in. He literally took this man's place. And that's very symbolic of what was done on the cross. All right? He didn't just go to bat for you, okay? He took your leprosy and he took your sin. And he took my leprosy and he took my sin, but he traded places with us. He put us in his position so we are seen by God as righteous. We are seen as if we have never sinned once. Look, we all need to come to Jesus as a leper. And Jesus showed us all mercy. This same mercy that he showed us, this is the mercy we show to everybody. And it doesn't matter what they did, because it doesn't matter what you did. And it doesn't matter who they are. It doesn't matter what they believe. It doesn't matter who they vote for. His mercy and his grace is enough. And just like he did for the leper, Jesus traded places with all of us so we could all be free and we could all have a relationship with him. He gave us mercy so we could show mercy. It's kind of like our Christian calling card, right? I know for me, there was a time in my life when somebody that probably didn't have to showed me mercy. And in that encounter, it was for the first time that I encountered the mercy of God. It changed me. And I cannot imagine not giving that mercy to someone else. Guys, let's go ahead and bow our heads. Hey, I just want to say this. Many of us grew up in church, like here in the Bible Belt. Like even if we don't know who Jesus is, we know who God is. And maybe at one point, maybe you walked in God's great grace and in his mercy, right? For a season you walked tall and you recognized the gift you were given. But somewhere along the way, you stepped out of that mercy. Maybe it was as simple as you forgot. Maybe it was you got distracted. Or maybe it's because of a failure you had in your life that you're still carrying with you today. And like the leper, you know who God is. And you know his power and his authority. And you know he is able to forgive you. But maybe you're struggling with, is he still willing? Maybe you think your failure is just too big and you've used up all of God's mercy. Let me just say for a second that Jesus passionately disagrees with you. Look, and there's nothing you can do that his grace cannot cover. And if that's you and you're ready to say, look, I am ready to walk in your mercy again. I know I don't deserve it, but you can separate my sins as far as the east is from the west, and I will walk in your grace once more. I want to pray with you. And I'm not going to have you stand. I'm not going to have you come to the front. But all heads down, eyes closed, nobody looking around. But if that's you and you want me to pray for you today, raise your hand. I see you. I see you in the back. Okay. So, and maybe you're here today and you've never accepted God's mercy at all. But you're at a point where you're like, I'm just tired of doing this on my own. Like I'm ready to walk and I want this mercy that you're talking about. Like same thing, nobody looking around, eyes closed. If that's you, raise your hand so I can pray with you. Okay. So if that was you today, hey, pray something like this. Just say, Father God, I know I'm a sinner. I know I need your mercy. Thank you for everything you did on the cross. Thank you for grace and for your compassion. And Father, I invite you into my life to guide my steps as I walk towards you. Father, right now I give you my heart and call you Lord. Give me strength and courage to follow you when it's hard and to worship you through everything, Father. In Jesus' name we pray. And everybody said, amen.